Hello and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm Anthony Tezak. It's June, and at the Capitol that can only mean one thing. Budget negotiations are in full swing. The state's constitution requires legislators and the governor to enact a new state budget no later than June 30th. By all accounts, this year's fiscal outlook is extraordinarily challenging and will make lawmakers' task difficult. Here to talk about some of the economic challenges facing Pennsylvania and the hurdles that will need to be overcome to reach a budget agreement is State Representative Ryan Mackenzie. Representative, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me, Anthony. And the topic that we're going to discuss today, the state budget, is one of paramount importance here in Pennsylvania, so I'm glad we're going to get in depth on it today.
Well, let's get right into it. Recently, the most recent state fiscal revenue outlook has been released, and it hasn't been particularly good. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's correct. So the numbers that were released for April showed that the revenue expectations were off, and so the actual revenue that was realized was $328 million less than expected. And year to date, we're about $425 million below expectations. So as you can see, we're in quite a hole, and really that also magnifies itself as you move forward. So because we're below expectations now, we have a deficit as we head into the next year. And then also what that does is that means that we have to lower our budget baseline for the next year. And that's because we have a balanced budget requirement here in Pennsylvania. That's a good thing. We want to make sure that we're fiscally responsible and using our taxpayer dollars wisely that we have and not running up debt like we had in previous administrations during the Rendell years. And so this is really, it's going to be a challenge, but also we do have to make sure that we spend those dollars responsibly and maintain a balanced budget going forward.
Now, even before these latest numbers were released, the task of balancing the state budget is a tough one. We already had a budget shortfall of about $1.4 billion. So I'm assuming this makes it more difficult, correct?
Absolutely. So, moving forward, the two biggest cost drivers were certainly pensions. We have a significant pension problem. Our state budget is around $29 billion per year, and our unfunded liability in our pension system is over $50 billion. So you can see the magnitude of that problem, and the way that we have to resolve that issue is by making annual payments back to the pension fund. And it's because of a number of factors, which would take us a whole nother show to discuss. But right now, the payment schedule that we're on calls for an additional $600 million in pension contributions as opposed to last year. So that's a $600 million increase year over year. Obamacare and the federal mandates that go along with that are going to cost Pennsylvania another $220 million. So right there, you're talking $820 million. That's 58% of that $1.4 billion shortfall that you were talking about. And again, now lower revenue has been realized here in Pennsylvania. So we certainly have a challenging budget picture ahead of us. And really what we need to do is make sure that we're helping job creators. And so we've done a lot in the legislature. I'm proud to be a part of some of those reforms that we've made, reforming our tax code, helping improve workforce development programs, but there's a lot more to do. And I have proposals on the table that I've worked on specifically in the area of workforce development and taxes. One is Career Bound. It's a great program to encourage job creators and students to work together and collaboratively make sure that we have the skilled talent to create jobs going forward. That's over in the Senate. Hopefully they're going to act on that. But so there are a lot of challenges budget-wise, and we need to really focus like a laser to make sure that we're improving the economic climate here in Pennsylvania so that we can grow our revenue that's coming in as opposed to just worrying about where we have to make cuts.
Now, I know you had said it could take a whole nother show to discuss them, but briefly, can you discuss some of the factors contributing to the budget shortfall?
Yeah, so again, if you're talking specifically about pensions, in that area, there was underfunding for about 10 years by the state. They were either contributing $0 or very greatly reduced payments to that pension system. Also, we had two severe economic downturns in that time period, which greatly reduced the returns that were coming into the pension system. And then also there were some terrible decisions made by legislatures in previous sessions before I was in the House, where they granted increased benefits for all state employees to the tune of 25 to 50% increases in their benefits, but called for no additional contributions. And those increases were retroactive to the individual employee's start time. So these were years and years of increases, which added significant stress and strain to the pension system, but there was no increase in contributions. So those three factors have really thrown that pension system out of whack. And again, it's now causing us to greatly increase our annual contributions. And so that is the biggest driving factor in our budget strain.
What are your biggest priorities in balancing the state budget?
Yeah, so when we look at our state budget, about 40% of our state budget is in education. So that's really a top priority for us here in Pennsylvania. We need to make sure that we continue to focus on strengthening our public school system, and all educational opportunities need to be available to students, but we need to make sure that we have the funding and the resources available to do that. So in order to make sure that those dollars are available, we need to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible in other areas of the budget. We need to make sure that we continue to do what we can to protect taxpayers. Taxpayers are already overburdened, and we need to make sure that we're helping them as much as possible. And also just, again, reforming government in general. We've talked about some of the problems that are out there, so we need to look at reform proposals as well, so that we can free up some money from other spaces. And so, again, protecting taxpayers, strengthening education, reforming government, and creating jobs. Again, I mentioned that earlier, and if we can actually create jobs and grow our economy, we'll have more revenue at our disposal for the budgets going forward then.
Now, already this year, we had the governor's budget address. We had the budget hearings held by the Appropriations Committee. So now, what are the next steps in reaching a budget deal?
Yeah, so where we're at now is actually the governor may come back with a revised plan. It's unique, but because of the revenue expectations being lower than we had initially thought they were going to be, he may come back and offer us a revised plan, which would be a helpful framework for us going forward. But the next steps then are really that the House and the Senate will actually make proposals, and we're talking concrete, on-paper proposals with line items spelled out, and the amount of spending would be shown there for each of those different programs. There's always a back and forth, a negotiation which goes on, whichever House moves or body moves first, whether it's the House or the Senate. We pass it, and then it goes over to the other chamber, and negotiations really start there at that point. So we're looking for the governor's leadership and guidance to see what his priorities are. But then throughout the course of June, we're going to be working on amending, making changes to those proposals, and actually passing a budget.
Okay. Now, since the governor took control of the governor's mansion, and we now have a Republican-controlled legislature, we've had 3 on-time state budgets. Are we going to have a 4th?
That's correct. Yes. The short answer is yes. And I'm confident in that because, again, we believe in responsible governing. And so we have been able to pass a budget on time each of the years that I've been here, and I look forward to doing that again. It's going to be a very big challenge this year, but I'm confident that we're going to be able to do that. And it's really important because a lot of state dollars go out to local government or nonprofit entities receive funding through the state budget. And these organizations, they're relying on the funding to be there. And so we need to do the responsible thing, again, pass the budget on time. It's our constitutional mandated requirement that we pass it by June 30th, and I'm confident that we'll do that again this year.
All right, Representative Mackenzie, I wish you luck in the upcoming weeks. I know you've got a lot of work ahead of you, and I'm sure some busy nights too.
Yeah, well, thank you, Anthony. Again, it is going to be a big challenge for us this year with the budget, but again, if we stick to our principles and those frameworks of strengthening education, protecting taxpayers, making sure we're creating jobs, and reforming government, I'm confident that we'll get a budget passed on time by June 30th.
All right, and hopefully after that's done, we can have you back and talk to you about what was done.
That'd be great.
That's all the time we have for today's program. I'm Anthony Tezak. If you have any questions about what you've just seen or any state government concerns, you can contact Representative Mackenzie at his district office or through his website or Facebook. That information will appear in just a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join us again next time for another edition of Legislative Report.
Did you know that the state capitol is not only the epicenter of the Commonwealth's governing bodies, but was once home to 390 preserved Civil War flags? During the war, it was customary for each state to furnish their regiments in battle with flags representing their contribution to the Union Army. After the war, Pennsylvania's military department was responsible for collecting the flags, and in 1872, they were reverently housed in the Capitol. Following the completion of construction on the new Capitol building in 1914, the Civil War flags were moved to the Capitol Rotunda. They were kept untouched in custom-made flag cases until 1982, when the Capitol Preservation Committee initiated its Save the Flags project. Throughout the years, dust and long-term vertical display of the flags had begun to devastate the brittle silk fabric and painted designs. The flags were removed by local textile conservators and were repaired and preserved in storage units that protect the relics from light, dust, and excessive handling. Now you know.
Did you know the Avenue of Flags presentation at Indiantown Gap National Cemetery has over 500 casket flags? Among the flags displayed are Commonwealth, territorial, and military flags. The flags are tied to 20-foot poles spaced 40 feet apart on both sides of the main drive of the cemetery. It takes about 2 hours to set up and take down all of the flags. Volunteers are encouraged to help with this task and must be at least 13 years of age. All of the flags are donated to the Avenue of Flags by families of the deceased. Now you know.
Hi, and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Ryan Mackenzie of the 134th District in Berks and Lehigh counties. As a member of the newly formed Manufacturing Caucus in the House, I've been able to travel around the state and tour various manufacturing facilities, learning firsthand the challenges of not only running a business in Pennsylvania, but staying alive in a highly competitive global marketplace. Recently, I and other lawmakers had the opportunity to tour the ArcelorMittal facilities in Steelton, within a few miles of the state capitol. This company specializes in making steel rails for railroads and certain types of cranes. They're world-renowned for the quality of their products. And also, the Mittal facility in Steelton actually has ties to the Lehigh Valley, as it was once part of Bethlehem Steel. Products made at this location include standard and head-hardened steel railroad rails and crane rails, specialty blooms, specialty quality bars, and large-diameter forging quality ingots. Join me now as we tour this manufacturing facility.
Welcome here to Steelton. I've been here for 27 years now. I've got almost 50 years in the business. This plant has a very rich history. Since 1867, we've been operating the steel plant, so it's the longest continuously operated steel plant in the country. And it's been on the forefront of technology since that time. We had the first Bessemer furnace here. We had the first open hearth furnace here. The electrics came early on in the electric furnace industry, and right now we're basically into an industry which is a big forging industry that Corey mentioned. We make some very, very rich forgings and steels for the government application, electric power generation, those kind of things. So Steelton has been here a long time. It's got a history of very fine people, very adaptable people. A lot of change over time, ups and downs, but you know the industry as well as I do if you've been around a while. The products we have here, the anchor business, is rail. In fact, we dug one up the other day that was in one of our projects from the 1880s, they said. Must have been a stamp on it. I'm going to go find that. I want to see it, because that's very, very old, and probably an iron rail versus a steel rail. The original rails in this country were iron, very soft, malleable, and finally when we got the Bessemer and the open hearth, we got into steel rail, which in some cases is programmed to last 20 to 30 years, depending on where it's put in track. So it's a very durable product, but that's what we do here. In 1994, we modernized this plant. We put $80 million into it for a new steelmaking, what you'll see out there, new steelmaking equipment, and our railhead hardening equipment was put in '94. So we spent almost $80 million then. And this plant has always gotten attention. Right now we have 3 projects in the plant. I think about a little over $40 million of investment still going in the plant, and things we earn because we perform. And that's the people and the business we're in. Besides rail today, by the way, rail has changed from sink water steel, which is if it's gray and sinks in water, you can sell it. But that's no longer true. It's a very premium product. It's like bearing quality almost in terms of what's required to meet customer specifications today. So this plant lives on it differentiates itself from rebar, structural, those low quality. We don't make that here. We make nothing but high quality. And we've been doing that, and we still get the investment climate and get it assigned to us. We earn it, by the way. We work pretty hard at being sure that we're a productive group, profitable group, and we define the investment on that basis.
We make about 400 grades of steel, roughly, out of 13 basic recipes. So at the ladle furnace, we take from the 13 recipes and we can modify to get one of the 400 or so grades of steel that we make as a finished product. As we're going to go to the caster, we're going to save everybody the labor of climbing up the 5 flights of stairs to get up onto the cast floor. We'll go to what we call the run out. You'll get to see the very large as cast bloom coming out of the caster. It's 14.5 inches by 23.5 inches in cross section. It's the biggest in the industry. We call it a jumbo bloom. If you look at that as cast bloom, if you would cut a 1-inch sliver off of that as cast bloom, that weighs about 100 pounds. All right. Most of when we make rail, we cut a bloom to a specified length that it produces 4 rails about 90 feet long from one as cast bloom. To get back up to rolling temperature about 2100 degrees takes 5 to 6 hours in a soaking pit set at about 2400 degrees Fahrenheit. If you let that bloom go cold, it takes about 14 hours to get it hot. And a whole lot of natural gas, right? That's exactly right. The new reheat furnace is a walking beam style furnace. It'll take that cold bloom and get it up to temperature in about 4 hours. A hot bloom is just about a rock skipper through the furnace. We're really looking forward to the commissioning of the big reheat furnace. At the same time, we've got a smaller, what we call an equalization furnace, which is nearly ready for commissioning. To replace 2 1900-something vintage piles of brick with natural gas burners in them. One of the things you're going to see here as we work our way up through, steelmaking is quite new, as things go. Steelmaking in the caster, the scrap plant 98. There's one major investment in the rolling mill's head hardening, which is the same time as steelmaking was put in the 94s. But the mill stands that we use to produce the rail, the high quality rail that we produce today, were designed and made in 1912. We've got a couple of upgrades in the 44 in the 50s and 60s where we got variable position of the top roll so we can make a variety of sections of product. In the 44 we can take that gigantic as cast bloom and roll it all the way down to a 6-inch by 6-inch square billet and just about any rectangle or square shape in between. you got, what's behind me is the melting furnace. That's where all the scrap goes in, and we melt it down into 150 tons of liquid metal. That siren that you heard just a minute ago, we take a sample in the liquid, we measure the temperature, we measure the carbon, and measure the oxygen. If they're within the range that we need, we tap the heat. Typically, the liquid is tapped out of the furnace right at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. All right. We have a tapping sequence in the furnace that's an automatic tapping sequence, which is unique in the industry. What happens is in the bottom of the furnace, there's a tap hole. The furnace tilts, the tap hole opens automatically, and then the liquid starts to transfer into a ladle underneath. As the weight goes into the ladle, the furnace will continue to tilt until we get within 5,000 pounds of the aim tap weight. Then the furnace quickly rotates back to a negative direction, stopping the tap. That's one way to avoid slag into the liquid. If you take furnace slag and put it in a ladle, you have to dump that off. It's very difficult to finish the heat chemistry-wise with furnace slag in the liquid. All right, slag is a necessary product that we make. It's a purifier, if you will. It pulls some of the oxides, the residual elements that we can oxidize out into the slag. It also insulates the liquid, and it insulates the arc so that the arc stays submerged. It doesn't jump out against the structure. That furnace is 100% water cooled, so there's water panels all the way around and in the roof. We pump about 21 million gallons of water a day through our cooling system in the furnace when we run. All right, so it's critical that we don't arc against that steel tube, put a hole in it, and then start putting water on top of liquid. All right. One of the rules in the industry is you can put water on hot steel, but you can't put hot steel on water. Right? Because once you trap it, it expands. So he'll pick that bucket up, he'll go over top of the furnace, and then he'll lower the main hoist, which the bottom of the bucket will then open and the scrap will fall out. The red glowing part that's in the middle there is the electrode. That's what actually creates the arc. That's a graphite, like the graphite in a spark plug. It's kind of the same concept, just much larger. Once the crane is out of the way, you'll see the roof swing back on, the electrode will start to lower, and then the arc will start again. The other thing that'll happen is there's a duct that's laid over, that rotates up and matches to that big hole, and that's what draws the off dust and gas out to the bag house for filtering to keep the particulate out of the air. As you can see, we're running 2 strands of the caster. You get an idea of the size of the bloom that we produce here in Steelton. That bloom coming out of the bottom is still roughly about 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. While it looks cold on the sides, you can see the end is still quite red. All right? For the most part, heat goes into the caster up top, transfers into a tundish, and then is distributed through all 3 strands. It takes about 4 hours from the start of time at which it starts to cast till it runs through. We run about 16, 18 inches a minute on the caster. Right? So it looks like it's barely moving, but it's such a big piece, it takes a long time for it to solidify. Those blooms are about 18,000 pounds each. From here, we sell some product in the as-cast form, but the majority gets rolled.
Well, gentlemen, real quickly, this is what we call our screw-down computer. What this does, it tells the rolls here what I'm here adjusting. It tells them exactly where I want to go here. Right now, I'm rolling the Norris cylinder product, 7 3/4 square. And then when it comes in on the tracking system, as you see, this is Bloom, Cast Bloom 06R. It's number 13 for ours. And then when it dropped down, it would tell this computer, and then we would go from there. This bloom here is approximately, we roll north about 2,400. Real quickly, my left hand is what we call controlling the canal, the riverside guard in my left hand. Right hand is the canal guard. And right up top here, we have what we call kick-ups. And then through a series of moves, as you will see as I progress, this is the way we proceed. We generally take no more than a 2-inch bite. If you watch it, each time I progress, each time I make a pass, it's generally going to take about 2 inches.
So if he would put it into the wrong pass, he might be programmed to go in through the 12-inch pass, taking a 2-inch bite. But if he goes into another pass, he might be taking a 4-inch bite, and then he breaks a $100,000 set of rolls.
So
This is one of the more critical jobs that we have. Don pretty much runs the entire machine for where we come up and over and across. He's got 1 or 2 computer monitors there you can see. He's looking at, well, you got 1, 2, 3 monitors that display temperatures at various locations. So he's got to manage all the data that he gets from the various computer monitors and then actually use it to make decisions to run the machine. As I mentioned, the machine does learn, but the operator needs to be here to interject to help it learn a little faster when we get started. If all things were the same, every bar come out at the same temperature, it had the same surface condition, the water temperature was fixed, you could basically turn the light switches off and go home because the machine would run itself, but that's not reality. So Don has to make sure that everything stays where it's supposed to be, and then we make a good quality product for the customer. But total service is how many years, Don?
39.
39. All right, and that's fairly typical for length of service. We have been over the last 3-4 years been able to bring new folks in, but as I mentioned in the van, our average age of our workforce is probably in the vicinity of about 53 to 55 years old. So there's going to be a very significant transition in the next couple of years when folks like Don and the many others that are with them decide that they're going to spend some of that money that they've earned over the last 40 years and retire. If it takes, on the neighborhood of 6 months to a year to learn everything you need to learn over here, and even then you don't really learn everything. Some of it you kind of got to do trial by fire. It's an investment in our people when we train them. Typically when people get over here, they like to stay over here. It is one of the better jobs that we have. But you can't be afraid of computers if you come over.
Well, it's been an incredible day here at the Steelton plant, and what we've learned is that it's a very intensive process. A lot of labor goes into it, a lot of materials, a lot of energy. So talking with the producers here at the plant, they've talked to us about some of the challenges they face in terms of finding the appropriate workforce, getting the appropriate energy off the grid, and also making sure that they can deliver their materials to market. So it's been a very informative day. A long process goes into making steel. We're glad that it still is taking place right here in Pennsylvania. It's a great industry we have, and we want to make sure that it continues to occur here in Pennsylvania. That's all the time we have for this month's program. I'm State Representative Ryan Mackenzie. If you have any questions about what you've just seen, or if I can help with any state-related government concerns, please contact me at my district office or through my website or Facebook. That information will appear in a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join me next time for a Legislative Report.